17-year-old Jake Morrison walked into the Jefferson County courtroom with a smirk that chilled everyone present. There was no hint of remorse, only arrogance, as he laughed at the grieving family of the man he had brutally murdered, Michael Turner. Convinced that his youth made him untouchable, he treated the courtroom like a stage, mocking the system that was quietly closing in around him. What he didn't know was that the most devastating blow wouldn't come from the prosecution, but from the one person who had seen behind his mask, his own mother. The evening of November 3rd settled over the quiet suburban streets of Ridgewood, Ohio, wrapped in an eerie autumn calm. Fallen leaves whispered across driveways under the faint hum of streetlights. Each home glowed with warmth and routine, unaware that the night's silence would soon be shattered. Inside his small but cozy home on Willow Brook Drive, 52-year-old Michael Turner was winding down after a long day. The comforting aroma of dinner still lingered in the air. A high school history teacher with a heart full of patience and kindness, Michael had spent decades inspiring students with stories of courage and sacrifice, never realizing his own story would end in an act of senseless cruelty. The tranquility of Ridgewood was deceptive, a fragile calm masking a storm of evil about to descend. Michael Turner's home, a symbol of stability and compassion, would become a crime scene that scarred the entire neighborhood. He was known for his immaculate garden, his warm smile, and the way he always stopped to help anyone in need. That night, the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the faint murmur of distant traffic, a peaceful rhythm that gave no hint of the horror that was about to unfold. The attack that followed wasn't about theft or rage. It was an eruption of pure, unprovoked malice. A moment so barbaric that detectives would spend months searching for a motive that simply did not exist. The first record of that nightmare came at 10:47 p.m., a panicked, cut-off 911 call filled with desperate screams from the Turner residence. The dispatcher barely caught a few broken words before the line went dead, replaced by an unbearable silence. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars were speeding through the darkened streets toward the quiet house with the glowing porch light and untouched newspaper by the door. Through the window, the illusion of peace shattered, revealing chaos and unimaginable violence. Furniture overturned, walls splattered, and on the floor lay Michael Turner, lifeless amid the wreckage of his final struggle. The brutality was shocking, far exceeding anything required to overpower one man. It was personal, vicious, and disturbingly deliberate. His wallet sat untouched. Cash and valuables were still in plain sight. The only thing missing was a life. The room was thick with the scent of blood and despair, a silent testament to evil for evil's sake. Investigators stood frozen, their breath shallow, realizing they were staring at something that went beyond reason, a crime of darkness without motive. When detectives delivered the news to Michael's sister, Elena Ruiz, just after midnight, her world fractured. The sterile voice on the phone carved her reality apart. Denial hit first, wild and frantic, until the officer's tone made it clear. There was no mistake. The truth crashed down, cold and merciless, and her grief tore through the silence of her home like a storm. Driving to the police station, the streets she had known her entire life suddenly felt foreign, haunted by an unseen cruelty. In the harsh, fluorescent light of the interview room, detectives offered condolences that couldn't begin to touch the depth of her pain. Every word they spoke deepened the wound. An invasion, a senseless murder, no reason at all. Elena's mind fought to reconcile the image of her gentle brother, the man who loved books, laughter, and family dinners, with the blood-soaked scene they described. The contrast was unbearable, a collision of innocence and brutality. The investigation began, but it was a fog of confusion and heartbreak. There were no enemies, no debts, no reason. Michael Turner had been a man everyone admired, a fixture of his community. The lack of a motive became its own form of torment, a hole that reason couldn't fill. How could such evil exist without warning, without meaning? When the news spread through Ridgewood, it was like poison through the town's veins. Neighbors locked their doors earlier, glancing over their shoulders at night. Michael wasn't just another name on a news ticker. He was their teacher, their neighbor, their friend. His death didn't just take a life. It shattered the illusion that goodness could protect you from the monsters hiding behind familiar faces. The rain had finally stopped, But inside that house, the storm was far from over. Zara woke up in the hospital room, her small hand wrapped in white gauze, her mother asleep in the chair beside her, eyes swollen from hours of crying. The soft hum of machines and the faint beeping of monitors filled the silence. For a moment, she didn't remember what had happened. Then, flashes, the wire, the spark, the dog's bark. Her father's voice breaking through the chaos. It all came flooding back. She turned her head slowly, her neck stiff. Her eyes fell on the corner of the room where the family dog, Shadow, lay curled up on a blanket. His fur was damp, his eyes half closed, a faint bandage visible on his paw. He had been shocked too. Not as badly, but enough to leave him weak. Zara blinked, and a tear slipped down her cheek. "Shadow," she whispered, her voice trembling. The dog's ears twitched, and he lifted his head just enough to look at her. A soft whine escaped his throat, as if to say, "I'm here." Moments later, the door opened. Her father walked in, eyes tired, shirt still wrinkled, holding 2 cups of coffee. The second he saw her awake, the cup almost slipped from his hand. "Zara," he whispered, rushing to her side. He fell to his knees beside her bed, pressing his forehead against her tiny hand. "I'm sorry. I should have fixed that wire weeks ago." His voice cracked mid-sentence. Zara tried to smile. "You came for me." He looked up, tears welling. "No, sweetheart." He turned his gaze to Shadow. The dog wagged his tail weakly, the soft thump echoing in the quiet room. Later that evening, the doctor entered. He assured them Zara would make a full recovery. The burns were superficial, the shock hadn't reached her heart, but he also said something that lingered long after he left. "She's lucky," he said softly. "A few more seconds and—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. When they returned home 2 days later, everything felt different. The toys scattered in the living room, the faint smell of burned plastic near the outlet. All of it was a reminder. Zara was quieter now, not her usual cheerful self. She'd often sit by the window, watching the rain fall, one hand resting on Shadow's back. Her mother tried to smile more, cooking her favorite meals, pretending everything was fine. But every time she passed that corner, the one where her daughter almost died, her hands would tremble. That night, when the house fell silent, Zara's father stood alone on the porch. The wind was cold. The stars were faint. He looked at the spot where it all happened, where his little girl had almost been taken from him. He whispered into the darkness, "Thank you." Behind him, Shadow sat beside the door, his eyes glistening under the porch light. He seemed to understand. Days turned into weeks. Zara slowly regained her energy. Her laughter returned, faint at first, like a bird learning to sing again after a storm. But something about her had changed. She was more cautious, more aware. Sometimes she'd wake up in the middle of the night from nightmares, the crackle of electricity echoing in her ears. Each time, Shadow would jump onto her bed, curl up beside her, and rest his head on her chest until she drifted back to sleep. One morning, her teacher at school asked the class to talk about heroes. When it was Zara's turn, she stood up, clutching a drawing she had made with her small hands. It was a picture of her dog standing between her and a bolt of lightning. "My hero doesn't wear a cape," she said softly. "He barks." The whole class went silent. Months later, her father replaced every old wire in the house. He fixed the sockets, grounded the circuits, even bought special covers for every outlet. But no matter how many repairs he made, there was one thing he could never fix: the sound of that scream. It still echoed in his mind. Sometimes, late at night, he'd walk into Zara's room and just watch her sleep, her chest rising and falling. Shadow always beside her, tail twitching in dreams. He'd whisper, "You saved us both, buddy." And somehow the dog seemed to understand. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. Zara came running to her parents, holding a small box. Inside was a shiny gold tag engraved with the words, "Shadow, the hero who barked at death." Her father knelt down, tears welling in his eyes. He fastened the tag onto Shadow's collar, his fingers trembling. The dog barked once, proudly. Zara giggled, hugging him tight. For the first time in months, the house filled with laughter again, pure, unbroken, and alive. As the camera of life panned out, The house stood under a golden sunset, the yard bathed in warmth, the scars of that terrifying day slowly fading into memory. But deep inside that home, something new had been born, an unspoken bond, between a father who learned the value of every second, a child who found courage in fear, and a loyal creature who proved that sometimes angels don't have wings, they have paws. A year had passed since that storm, the night the house almost went dark forever. The seasons had changed, but inside the small suburban home, the memory still lingered. The wall socket near the corner was replaced. New paint covered the burns, but whenever the light flickered, Zara's mother would freeze, just for a moment. Zara had grown taller now, her hair longer, her smile brighter, but in her eyes there was still a quiet shadow of that night. She'd turned 6 last week, and for her birthday her parents had thrown a small party. Balloons, laughter, music, and Shadow, the family's golden hero, proudly wearing his engraved tag. But time, as it always does, had started to test them again. It was early autumn. The air was cool, the leaves fiery red. One evening, Zara sat on the porch, drawing with her crayons. Shadow lay beside her, head resting on his paws, watching the world as if guarding it. Her father was fixing the fence nearby, while her mother cooked dinner inside. Everything felt calm, peaceful. Then came the sound. A sharp, sudden crack from the back of the yard. Wood splintering, metal bending. The fence post gave way. Zara looked up, startled. And in that instant, a large, stray dog, thin, wild-eyed, hungry, slipped through the opening. It growled, teeth bared, eyes fixed on her sandwich sitting beside the crayons. Zara froze. Her tiny hands shook. Before anyone could react, Shadow leapt up, fur bristling, a deep growl rising from his chest. He placed himself between Zara and the stray, his body tense, tail stiff. The two dogs locked eyes. "Shadow!" Zara screamed. Her father turned, dropping his tools. The sound of his boots hitting the dirt echoed as he sprinted forward. But before he could reach them, the stray lunged. The next few seconds were chaos. Barks, snarls, a blur of motion. Shadow fought fiercely, forcing the intruder back toward the broken fence. The stray retreated, limping, finally disappearing into the trees. When it was over, Shadow stood there panting, a small cut visible near his ear. Zara ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. Her father arrived, breathing hard, voice shaking. "It's okay. It's over. It's over." He looked at Shadow, at the faint blood against his golden fur, and felt that same old rush of fear, the kind that grips a parent's heart and never really leaves. That night, after Shadow's wound was cleaned and bandaged, Zara refused to sleep without him. She kept one hand on his collar, as if afraid he might vanish if she let go. Her father sat in the doorway, watching them. The moonlight spilled across the floor, illuminating their silhouettes. He whispered to himself, "How many times can one life be saved by the same soul?" Days passed. The broken fence was replaced, stronger this time. Zara returned to her usual self, giggling, drawing, chasing butterflies with Shadow by her side. But one Sunday morning, while her mother folded laundry and her father read the paper, Shadow didn't come when called. Zara checked the porch, empty. The yard, silent. The gate, slightly open. "Daddy, Shadow's gone." The words hit him like a cold wave. He ran outside, calling the dog's name again and again. The forest behind their home swallowed his voice. Hours passed. The sun began to set, and Zara's tears wouldn't stop. "He always comes back," she whispered, hugging her stuffed toy. Just as night fell, a faint bark echoed from the distance. Then another, closer this time, and out of the darkness, limping but proud, Shadow appeared. In his mouth he carried something, a small, abandoned kitten, barely alive. Zara gasped, running forward. The kitten meowed weakly, soaked from rain, eyes wide with fear. Shadow gently set it down, nudging it toward her. Her father's heart sank at the sight. Even hurt, even tired, Shadow had gone back into danger, not for himself, but to save another life. He kneeled, stroking Shadow's fur. "You're not just a dog," he said, voice trembling. "You're a reminder that love protects even when no one's watching." Weeks later, the kitten, now named Lucky, had become part of the family. Zara adored her. Shadow watched over both of them, his old heroic eyes softer now, but still full of fire. One evening, Zara stood at the window, watching the sunset. "Dad," she said quietly, "why does Shadow always save people?" He smiled faintly. "Because he knows what almost happened. And he'll never let it happen again." She nodded, holding Lucky in her arms. "Then I'll save people too. Just like him." Her father's eyes welled up. "You already do, sweetheart." As months turned into another year, Shadow grew slower, older, his muzzle turning grey. But his spirit never faded. Every bark still carried courage, every step still carried purpose. And every time the wind rustled through the trees, it felt like a whisper, a reminder of that storm, that wire, that second chance life had given them. One night, as Zara slept beside her two companions, one brave, one rescued, her father stood by the doorway once again. He realized something then. Heroes don't always wear badges or uniforms. Sometimes they wear fur, sometimes they wag their tails, and sometimes they teach us that the truest kind of bravery is love that never stops protecting. 15 years had passed since that night. The storm, the spark, the scream that never happened. The little girl who once reached toward danger was now a young woman, her eyes older than her age, filled with stories only she and her loyal friend had lived. Zara had just turned 21. She stood on the same porch where she used to play, the porch where Shadow had once saved her life. The house had changed over the years, the paint a new shade, the garden wider, the fence stronger. But one thing remained constant, the feeling that love still lived here. Inside, her parents' laughter mixed with the soft hum of the TV. A framed photo sat on the mantel, Zara at 5 years old, her arms wrapped around a golden dog, both smiling into the camera. But tonight, that same dog lay quietly in a soft bed by the fireplace. Shadow's fur was silver now, his breathing slow, shallow. Time had finally come to collect the debt that even love couldn't pay forever. Zara knelt beside him, her fingers trembling as they brushed through his fur. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Remember that night? You pulled me away from the wire. You saved me." Shadow blinked, his cloudy eyes finding her one last time. His tail thumped weakly, once, twice. Her father stood in the doorway, silent, his eyes glistening. He'd seen this day coming, but knowing never made it easier. Her mother held a blanket close to her chest, trying not to sob. Zara continued, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You saved me again, and again. You even brought Lucky home. You've done enough, Shadow. You can rest now." For a moment, the house was completely still. Then, with a faint sigh, Shadow rested his head on her lap, and the light in his eyes slowly faded. The silence that followed was heavy, like the whole world had stopped breathing. Days later, they buried him under the old oak tree in the backyard, the one that had watched them grow together. Zara placed his collar on the small wooden cross her father built. The wind whispered softly through the leaves, carrying the sound of his name. Every evening after that, Zara would sit beneath that tree with Lucky beside her, watching the sunset, the same place where Shadow used to rest. Years went by. Zara became a veterinary nurse, saving lives just as he once saved hers. Her compassion, her patience, her courage, all of it traced back to that golden Shadow who had taught her the meaning of love that protects. One day, as she treated a frightened rescue dog at the clinic, the animal lashed out, scared, growling, but Zara didn't flinch. She spoke softly, calmly, with the same tone her father once used to calm her. "It's okay. No one's going to hurt you." The dog stopped growling. For a brief moment, its eyes softened, just like Shadow's used to. Zara smiled faintly. "Good boy." That evening, she returned home and walked to the backyard, where the oak tree still stood. The sky was a wash of orange and gold, the same colors that had watched Shadow's final sunset. She sat down, resting her head against the bark, whispering, "I did it, Shadow. I kept my promise." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves. For a moment, she could almost hear the faint jingle of his old collar, and the soft padding of paws beside her. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she smiled through it. "You never really left, did you?" Above her, the sky deepened to twilight. The first star blinked awake. And in that quiet moment, she knew. Heroes don't fade. They live on in the people they save, in the choices we make, in the love we carry forward.